Hello and welcome to Frontrunner Motorsport, a late look back at last weekend's racing now that I have returned from my brief break away. It's taken a while to catch up because there were some very long races and only so many hours in the day. But enough excuses. This weekend we saw the end of Indycar and Indy NXT for 2024 at Nashville, World Endurance from Fuji, NASCAR from Watkins Glen, Supercars from Sandown, Formula 2 from Azerbaijan, and of course, Formula Regional European, Euro Formula and Euro 4 from the Red Bull Ring in Austria. So as always, we will talk about the highlights, my predictions from last week, and some of the champions that were crowned. Make sure you subscribe and let's jump into the video.
I'm going all in on the number 7 Toyota again. They were so close in Texas. If not for the penalty, they would have won that race. Toyota will want to be on top form at their home race, and I think they'll take the win and a 1-2 finish. Porsche third and all three Ferraris just off the podium places. But I am expecting one hell of a battle in Fuji. Only a couple of rounds left and the series is still insanely tight. The GT class, not so much. Porsche are dominating here, but I think we'll see a BMW win in Fuji. Valentino Rossi will lead the 46 to glory, with Ahmed El Hati and Maxime Martin probably doing most of the hard work.
The penultimate round of World Endurance Championship and 6 hours of Fuji, Japan. We had some chaos at the start of this one as a few hypercars got tangled on the second lap. Both Ferraris hit each other, the number 5 Porsche lost its rear ring, and a few others were involved. Overall, a lot less damage than there could have been, but not great for Ferrari or Porsche. Others had issues throughout the long 6 hours. Cadillac led in the early stages, but were passed by the number 6 Porsche and bumped by the number 15 BMW. That led to a puncture, and their chances for this race were shattered. Some of the hypercars have definitely improved over the course of the year, especially Alpine, BMW and Lamborghini. Unfortunately, the latter wouldn't see the final stages of the race after they came to a halt with a gearbox issue. It's nice to see hypercars are competitive throughout the field, but it was Toyota and Porsche fighting for the lead ahead of Ferrari, until Kamui Kobayashi had an issue at his pit stop and then collided with an already battered Matt Campbell, doing big damage to both cars, and seriously wounding Toyota's title hopes. Whilst the Caddies' terrible day came to an end with half hour left, whilst fighting for the lower points places with the Alpine. This was a bad race for Toyota and Ferrari, and even Porsche had some battle scars, but the championship leading number 6 takes a massive advantage after winning this race well clear of their title rivals. BMW second, Alpine third and Peugeot fourth. It is a good result for teams that have had a tough season, but the championship looks like it's going to Porsche Penske, ending years of Toyota domination. Meanwhile, Manthey Porsche have already won the GT class for 2024, even after losing in Fuji to Ferrari. It looks like Porsche will be winning both classes in 2024, but we have to wait for Bahrain to be certain. This was an epic race with a lot of fighting, drama, and the only downer I have about it is the fact the title is all but sorted. Although, nothing is for certain.
Well, the Spaniard, he just needs a decent finish. As long as he's in the top 13, Palou will be champion. So a conservative, safe drive whilst Will Power gives it his all. I think the Penske driver will fall just short, maybe finishing third behind Colton Herta and Scott Dixon. He'll fight for the lead, with the Andretti driver just taking it.
The final round of IndyCar for 2024 was on the oval at Nashville, not the street circuit with the really cool bridge, which is a bit of a disappointment. Will Power versus Alex Palou was the fight for the title, who was going to be a 3-time champion. Well, it started badly for Alex Palou, who was starting at the back after mechanical issues in practice. It's a shame then that the championship was decided by an issue with a seatbelt. Will Power pitting on lap 13 as his slim title hopes crumble to dust. Felix Rosenqvist hit the wall in the Meyer Shank to bring out the yellow on lap 56. He has 2 more years of Meyer Shank, so this won't be too big a deal for the Swede. Catherine Legg was next on lap 90, and Marcus Ericsson also hit the wall as his poor season comes to an end. It was pretty tame end to the season. It only livened up for the last 10 laps as Pato O'Ward and Colton Herta raced for the lead. Herta won the race and jumped to second in the final standings, behind 3-time champion Alex Palou, and ahead of Scott McLaughlin and Will Power. Another great season from Alex Palou. That's 3 in 4 years for him. But overall, it was a disappointing end to the season. Will Power being wiped out by a faulty seatbelt on lap 13 killed any hope of a real title challenge in Nashville. But we do it all again in 2025 with a few new faces on the grid, including Prema, which I'm sure will make things even more interesting.
In the NXT, and there isn't a lot to fight for. Louis Foster is champion, Jacob Abel and Kyle Collette have secured 2nd and 3rd respectively. So the most high profile battle is between Callum Hedge, Salvador D'Alba and Jamie Chadwick for 4th. And I think Callum Hedge will secure it with a first win to end his rookie campaign. Keep an eye on him though, because next year he could be a championship contender.
The final round of Indy NXT was also in Nashville, and there was a lot less on the line. The top 3 places in the championship were secure, so the focus was on the battle for 4th. Callum Hedge was 4th coming in, but he made contact with Miles Rowe and took them both out of the race. Miles Rowe gets the award for worst second half of a season ever. This was not a very interesting race. We got a late safety car as James Miller and Jamie Chadwick collided, but Lewis Foster led start to finish and completes his championship winning year with another win. You'll see a few of these guys in IndyCar next year, I'm sure.
Away from the ovals, we might see a surprise win, and I will be praying for Shane Van Gisbergen to take another NASCAR victory. He's doing a lot better in the Xfinity Series recently, and we are seeing constant improvement. On the track, he's one of the best.
NASCAR at Watkins Glen. Love to see the stocks back on a racetrack, and this was a doozy. First lap, we got our first big crash that took out some big players like Denny Hamlin and Ryan Blaney. Daniel Suarez also span out, so it was a hard day for the playoff contenders. Shane Van Gisbergen and Ross Chastain could have been screwed over by this safety car, but they held on for the stage win and led into stage 3. Eventually, they did start to drop back and had to pit, but they climbed again as strategies worked themselves out. There were a couple of late restarts for a Harrison Burton puncture and William Byron and Brad Keselowski colliding, and then Tyler Reddick and Kyle Busch collided at the restart. That meant overtime. Chris Buescher won the race, passing SVG on the last lap after a great battle between the pair. The best playoff driver was Chase Briscoe in 6th. Next up is Bristol, where we lose the first 4 playoff contenders.
But I think Paul Aron will finally take his first Formula 2 win in the sprint race, and Richard Verschoor will win the feature, and maybe he'll even be allowed to keep it.
Formula 2 was in action in Baku, supporting Formula 1 as it always does. Gabriel Bortoleto was hunting down Isaac Hadjar, but there was still time for others to insert themselves into the title fight. A few new drivers in Baku, Christian Mansell, Luke Browning and Gabriel Mini, were making their debuts, and Mansell and Mini even led at the start of the sprint race. But this was the day for the first Paraguayan race winner in Formula 2. Joshua Dirksen passed both newcomers and led away. He was only stopped briefly by Ritomo Miata hitting the wall and bringing out the safety car. After a 3-lap restart and some panel bashing, Dirksen took his first win. The feature race started with an almighty pile-up. Oliver Gerfer hit the slow-moving Kushmini and Pepe Marti was launched upside down into the wall. Everyone was okay, and amazingly only 3 cars involved, but this meant a red flag and a restart. After a safety car start, we had less than half an hour of racing. We weren't done with the drama here though. Zane Maloney came out of the pits ahead of Andrea Kimi Antonelli, but had a big lock-up and they made contact, and Zane Maloney ended up at the back of the field. Gabriele Mini ended up in the wall, bringing out the safety car after a fantastic weekend of racing from him, and that meant the win went to Richard Verschoor.
And Richard Verschoor will win the feature, and maybe he'll even be allowed to keep it.
And Richard Verschoor will win the feature.
Nailed it. More importantly, with Hadjar not scoring in the last 4 races and Zane Maloney scoring nothing in Baku, Gabriel Bortoleto now leads the championship by 4.5 points. Following the Hadjar and Aaron pattern, he won't score any more points in 2024. Crazy feature, but good weekend for Formula 2.
The Sandown 500 is a very prestigious event that leads into the Bathurst 1000. Chaz Mostert has been clawing his way into Will Brown's lead in the championship over the last few rounds, and he has finished in the top 4 over the last 6 races. Will Brown hasn't won any of the last 10 races, but will end that run at Sandown, and he really needs to because Mostert is really closing him down.
We now head over to Australia for the Repco Supercars and the Sandown 500. Will Brown led early on, but we got a safety car for Richie Stanaway, who had some kind of strange issue with his car. That meant we got a mad dash for the pits as everyone came in. Todd Hazelwood was back and sharing the Brody Kostecki car. He got a puncture fairly early on that ruined their race, but at least he didn't crash. Lee Holdsworth had a spin in the Mostert car, but that wasn't as race-ending as Jordan Boys getting turned around into the Armco. And Dylan O'Keefe was another who got turned around, whilst Jackson Evans ended up in the gravel around the halfway stage. There were a few incidents breaking up the racing at Sandown. Will Brown led the whole race through it all, apart from when the pit stops were working themselves out, and when Brody Kostecki parked his car with 20 to go, it wasn't a problem for the championship leader. But it was a godsend for Chaz Mostert, who had pitted for new tyres and was down in the pack. As others pitted in front of him, he moved back into the top 10, and the cars in front would be just there, right in front of him. The restart was pretty manic and a few cars went off, none more than Jack LeBrock, who after a great race ended it in the barrier. Will Brown took his first win since Taupo and continues to lead the championship, but Chaz Mostert did climb to 7th, and it could have been a whole lot worse for him. Next up is the big one, the Bathurst 1000. It is still Mostert versus Brown versus Feeney for now, and that could be the decider for 2024.
Only a few series left to go. Formula Regional Europe, the last race at Imola, started with the title rivals colliding, and Kamara has now pulled a gap to Tarpanen. They will share a win each in Austria.
Formula Regional Europe was in action at the Red Bull Ring in Austria. Ugo Ugochukwu went off before the race even began, which sums up his 2024 so far. This race had a couple of incidents that brought out long safety cars, so the racing was very stop-start. Rafael Kamara and Tuka Tarpanen were well down for this one, so we were on for some different winners, and the first of those was James Wharton, challenged all the way by Evan Giltaire. Race 2 was absolute carnage at the start. Rafael Kamara lost his front wing, and then further along, Valerio Rinicella took out Tuka Tarpanen. So both title contenders had an atrocious weekend. This race was a battle all over, and it was great fun. Sadly, we got a late safety car with Enzo Deligny parked at turn 1. Teofil Nile took the win for Santaloc Racing after a 2-lap race to the line. Kamara still has a strong lead in the championship, but Tuka Tarpanen is in danger of losing second, with only 4 races left for 2024.
Euro Formula is barely worth talking about, and let's just go for a Brad Benavides clean sweep. I'm honestly surprised he hasn't done that already.
Euro Formula was also in action at the Red Bull Ring. Brad Benavides had pulled a large lead in the championship prior to this event, and it doesn't really look like anyone can stop him. It doesn't say a lot about the quality of the field when a driver who's only finished in the top 10 of races a couple of times over the last few years is so easily able to walk away with the title. It was a little bit damp in Austria, but with so few cars, surely they wouldn't hit each other, right? Well, actually, they were all very well behaved, especially considering we had a massive Euro Formula grid of 8 cars. A couple of new drivers joining the series late on. 17-year-old Edward Pearson looks to be a talent worth keeping an eye on, working his way up to second after a bad start in poor conditions. Brad Benavides was 15 seconds clear of the rest of the field as he took his 7th win of the year. Fernando Barrichello took his first win in race 2. He's already rookie champion, so this is just another accolade to add to the pile. Michael Shin won race 3, a very mixed weekend, some good battling, but as always, it's a hard watch with just 7 or 8 cars going round. Brad Benavides will be champion, he has a big lead, but winning this series in 2024 means almost nothing.
And that feat will be matched by Freddie Slater this time out, with Keen Nakamura-Berta taking the other win at the Red Bull Ring.
Finally, let's take a look at the youngsters in Euro 4, the final races we will look at from Austria, and indeed from this past weekend. The weather played a part, but the drivers handled it very well, with only Dion Gauda and Jack Beaton coming to blows, and a late spin for second in the championship, Hugh Yamakoshi, taken out by a rival, and that meant Freddie Slater took the win after a 1-lap sprint. Race 2 was wet and started behind the safety car. We didn't get a lot of racing in this one. Another safety car for Ollie Behrman's younger brother Thomas, who was making his racing debut in Austria. Freddie Slater took the lead as the race resumed and won by nearly 10 seconds. Race 3 was dry and Freddie Slater led again, looking for the clean sweep of the weekend, whilst a couple of Australians landed in the gravel, bringing out the safety car. It was a pretty simple race from then on in. Freddie Slater took all 3 wins, but lost the last one after a penalty was applied, so Hyo Yamakoshi took his second win of the year. Slater leads the championship for the Japanese driver with 1 round left. So that was all for Motorsport from the past weekend. As always, let me know your race of the weekend in the comments below. My personal choice has to be the World Endurance, which continues to find ways to entertain over 6 hours, when many series struggle at a fraction of that length. Next weekend is another busy one. We got Formula 1 from Singapore along with the F1 Academy, Super GT returns at Sugo, NASCAR from Bristol, IMSA and the penultimate round from Indianapolis, the penultimate round of British Touring Cars from Silverstone, and the penultimate round of TCR UK from Thruxton. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any motorsport content. Predictions video coming Friday. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching and have a good one.